You very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And as Prince's number one fan, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that the month of May, they are streaming all Prince music on Channel 30 on Sirius XM. So please partake all month. Thank you again for inviting me. I really think that this is an important topic as we are getting to the place where the governor is starting to entertain phased reopening. Employers really need to think about what steps they need to take and what things they need to consider as they contemplate reopening. So the objectives for this particular session are preparing to bring employees back to work, the safety considerations for returning employees to work, best practices for implementing the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. And even though some employers may be under 50, some of you may be in industries that may be exempt from the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Because we're not 100% sure what the exemption process looks like, it's still going to be good information to know what your responsibilities and obligations are. So the first thing that we want to consider on our next slide would be preparing to bring employees back to work. So, when we went into the furlough, layoff, just whatever we might be in right now, we didn't have time to prepare. We didn't have time to think about how you were going to decide which employees you were going to furlough, which employees you were going to lay off. It just happened. We just found ourselves one day in a situation where we had to make decisions very quickly. As we return back into whatever it's going to look like on the other side, we have a bit of time to really think about who we're going to bring back, what the landscape of our workforce is going to look like. And it is very important that you plan and that you be intentional about how you make those decisions. So the first thing to think about is really how are you going to select the employees that you bring back, particularly the order in which you bring them back, or if you bring everyone back and you only bring certain people back, how are you going to make those decisions? You may want to make sure that you don't have any type of situation where you may have what some people would perceive to be adverse impact because you brought back certain people and not others, that you weren't clear on how you made those decisions. Many organizations do seniority as they make those decisions as they would if they were going to do a layoff. And really, when you bring in these people back, you may want to think about it as kind of a reverse layoff, right? So whatever business case you would have used to make the decision on who you were going to lay off, you may want to use those decisions and those options as you think about who you're going to bring back. You don't want to consider anyone's medical situation. You don't want to think, well, this person is pregnant or this person is older or this person might be in a higher risk category. You can't make those decisions for them. You may offer them the opportunity to return to work once you've decided which departments or which seniority level will return to work. You can offer those individuals the opportunity to return to work. If they say that they are not comfortable returning, or if they say, I'm in a situation where I don't feel that I want to come back, then you will address that accordingly. But you can't make your decision to offer them the opportunity to return to work based on that. And the other thing that you really want to consider is how you communicate. You're not bringing everyone back. You want to make sure that you're communicating with everyone, even the people who you aren't bringing back, because you may bring people back in a phased approach. So you may bring certain individuals back now and certain individuals in 30 days and then others later. It's important to communicate even to the people that you're not bringing back first, because if they know and they're in touch with their colleagues and they're having, conversations and they know that these people are going back and I haven't heard anything, they're going to wonder, hey, am I not coming back? Do they not want me? Am I terminated? So it's important that you at least communicate with them, even the ones that you're not bringing back, and let them know the status. Let them know, hey, we're bringing these people back at this time. We're going to bring other people back another time, so that they know, so they're not left to assume. The other thing you want to do is also make sure that you are communicating what the expectations will be when people do return to work. So when we do get to the next slide, we're going to talk about that, but communication is going to be very important. The last thing that you want to consider as you're preparing is making sure that you have an onboarding process to bring people back. Because the reality is that individuals are coming back to a workplace that looks very different than the workplace that they left. So you want to make sure that you have created an onboarding process for them to help them understand what the expectations are going to be of them in their new workplace. So on our next slide, we will talk about some of the safety considerations. So things that you need to think about as you are preparing your workplace to bring individuals back is, asking questions, making sure that you understand the status of individuals who are coming back. Previously, asking these types of questions would not have been permissible. However, the EEOC has made it very clear that you can ask questions and you can even take individuals' temperatures as they return back to work to ensure that we are creating a safe work environment for all employees, as well as customers or visitors or anyone else who may be coming into the workplace or employees may be coming into contact with. So you may ask them, have they previously tested positive for COVID-19 and how long has it been since they've exhibited symptoms? You may also ask them for a doctor's note. Now, keep in mind that the time frame for individuals to get doctor's notes right now, it may take a little bit longer. Doctors are a little busy now, right? So it may take them a little bit longer to get a doctor's note, but you can ask for that in order for them to return to work. You also want to make sure that you are clearly and regularly communicating your safety expectations. So if you expect for individuals to wear face masks, you want to make sure that you are clearly communicating with them regularly that they are to wear face coverings. And be clear about what wearing a face covering means, because I have seen people with face coverings, but they're covering their chin or they're covering the top of their head like sunglasses. So be clear about what wearing a face covering means in your workplace and make sure that you are enforcing whatever expectation you have set. You may also want to consider taking individuals' temperatures when they come to work. As we have seen most recently, you can test negative today and test positive tomorrow. So you may want to consider regularly doing any type of temperature checks and being clear about the expectation of what having a high temperature means in your workplace. So you want to outline that in advance. So if a high temperature for you is 100 degrees, you just want to make sure that you outline that and that you're clear, and that anyone who hits that threshold or above, you do not allow them into the workplace, and that you don't make any exceptions. Even if that individual is in a very specialized job, if you've set that expectation and you've made that policy, you want to make sure that you're enforcing that. You may want to also, I know it seems redundant, but again, most recently we have seen that even people who are getting tested every day, people are getting their temperatures taken every day, things change from day to day. And so you may want to make sure that you're asking about symptoms and checking temperatures at the beginning of each shift, each day, if you're going to do it. Because that way you can stay on top of it again, because I might have been fine Monday, but Friday I might start exhibiting symptoms. The other thing that you may want to also consider is advising individuals on proper hand washing. I understand that we are all adults, and I understand that you may say, well, I have a poster, or people know how to wash their hands. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that as an employer, we are giving people all of the tools that they need to be successful, to include possibly putting a poster in each restroom, or giving them something if they're not going into a physical location every day and they're going out on their own to do visits or go into other places, making sure that you make hand washing protocol available to them and set expectations on frequency of hand washing. So if you want them to wash their hands every time they interact with someone before they interact with another person. And, as soon as they leave one home, you want them to put on hand sanitizer and then go somewhere and wash their hands before they go into another home. Set clear expectations about what you want them to do as it relates to hand washing or any other type of hygiene. And then finally, if they are at work and they start to exhibit symptoms, if they start to feel sick, please ask them to go home. It's going to be very important for the workplace that we don't have people in the workplace that are exhibiting symptoms. So you may ask them to go home as soon as they start to exhibit symptoms. You don't have to wait until the end of their shift. You don't have to wait until they get a positive confirmation of COVID, because the reality is that we don't know when or if someone will be able to get a test, and we don't want to take the chance and the risk of impacting employees in the workplace or any of our customers. So our next slide talks about some additional safety considerations. So you would want to consider having individuals use face coverings even in the office. Even if they are in an office environment, you would want to consider that. You want to make sure that you are also implementing social distancing even in the workplace. So it's not just for strangers, it's not just for our customers, it's not just for if we go into someone's home, it's even with each other, even in our workplace. So some ways that you may want to consider social distancing if you are in an office setting would be potentially to stagger schedules or alternate days. So potentially, if everyone does to be in the office every day, have some people who aren't in close proximity to each other work, on Mondays, have other people come in on Tuesdays, and stagger the schedule so you don't have as many people in the office at the same time. You may want to also consider, staggering schedules, not scheduling as many people at one time as you would normally schedule, if that's possible to accommodate the needs of your organization. You should also consider closing any common areas. So if you have a lunchroom or a fitness center, a place where people tend to gather, you may want to consider closing those areas and asking individuals to bring in their own food, or, potentially if they could bring food that they may not have to put in the microwave, so that they're not going into the kitchen area and touching things. You may want to consider that, or come up with something else that will limit the opportunity for people to be in a room where they will gather. You may want to also consider physical barriers. Now, everyone doesn't have the opportunity to do that because some people are going to people's homes. Some people are, in an environment where they're meeting with people face to face. But they do have the new plexiglass. Well, I don't think they're new, but people are now using them. The plexiglass shields. If you're in a small office environment that has cubicles, you may want to consider making the cubicles high wall cubicles instead of low wall cubicles, because quite honestly, any barrier that you can create would be helpful. If you are in an environment where you're all in the same place, consider potentially propping open doors inside so that people don't have to touch doorknobs or door handles as often. So that may be something that you want to consider as well. And then finally, to consider reducing the use of shared equipment. So if possible, not using the same tools, the same cash register, the same office supplies, not using the same items if possible, and making sure that there is a thorough cleaning regimen that is in place for individuals if they do have to utilize those same tools. Yes.
Kimberly, one quick question came in. There just seems to be one missing word. I believe this fourth bullet is you should ask employees each day. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Ask employees each day if they're experiencing the symptoms. Great, thank you.
Yes.
So next slide after safety considerations.
Yes. So
hey, for our 2 o'clock meeting, I thought I was going to be able to spend a lot more time putting that spreadsheet together. I've
somebody talking.
So I've started it.
Bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to try to mute all the
I don't love it.
Okay.
Sorry
All
about
right.
that.
Thank you. That's okay. All right. So, if you put those safety considerations into place, it's important that as you start to recall people, you communicate with them the safety considerations that you put in place, the things that you've done in your workplace, or the safety precautions that you expect in the workplace so that as you recall them, hopefully you will address some of their fears. However, when they come in, they still may have some concerns. So OSHA does state that employees may refuse work if they reasonably believe they are in imminent danger. However, that has limitations. So just a generalized concern that, COVID-19 is a disease doesn't necessarily rise to the level of imminent danger. However, if they've come in contact with a coworker, or if someone has, been traced back to that location who has tested positive, that may be a valid concern. You want to address those on a case-by-case basis. You don't want to just blanket state that, there's nothing to worry about here, people, just come to work. You do want to address those concerns on a case-by-case basis. However, keeping in mind that the OSHA imminent danger concern does have some limitation, and it can't just be a generalized concern. The other thing is that, we've been in an environment, now many organizations are in service environments and working from home has not been an option. So I absolutely understand that. But for some organizations, much of the work has been done remotely. And so if people have concerns and they've been able to get their work done remotely, it is a consideration for you to allow them to continue to work remotely until we get into a place where people feel that there are more things in place, such as testing or vaccine, or, we are further along in the phased opening process where they would feel more comfortable coming to work. So if you have the opportunity and you are able to allow individuals to work remotely, it should be something that you consider. It is also recommended that you don't resume any type of business travel or conferences. Not that I think there are a lot of conferences happening right now. I'm not sure that there are. But, limiting those things. If people have to go into someone's home because of the nature of their work, of course, that's what they have to do. But if you don't have to do a meeting in person, as we are doing this virtual webinar, perhaps you can provide virtual tools for those individuals to have those meetings or do those consults virtually if possible. And then you want to also make sure that you create a protocol for how you will respond if someone tests positive. So if someone tests positive, aside from having them removed from the workplace and not returning, what are you going to do from a notification of other employees' perspective to cleaning the area? So really thinking about in advance, prior to having someone test positive after people return to work, making sure that you know what your process is going to look like and how you're going to address it. So now that, we are in this new landscape, there have been some new laws that have passed. And so you want to make sure that you are updating your policies and that your policies are as up to date as possible to include any of the leave laws that are new and some leave laws that are not so new that maybe some of you just might not have had an opportunity to update your handbook with, okay? So you want to make sure that you're updating your handbook, that you're amending your leave policies to include the Families First Coronavirus Act, to make sure that those types of leaves are included in the handbook. You want to make sure that you're also providing your employees, if applicable, with posters. You also want to make sure that if you have a remote work policy, that you strengthen that policy. And if you don't have that policy, that you draft one, particularly if you have people working from home now. Some things to consider for that particular policy would be setting expectations around availability. What is the time frame that people should respond to emails and voicemails? What should their workload look like? How often do you expect them to respond to emails? Keeping in mind that they're working from home now looks very different than working from home did before, because now people have children at home. They have spouses at home. So you just want to think about those things as well. You want to make sure that you're revising your safety policies to include social distancing, facial coverings, or any other expectations that you set a policy, that you update your policy to include those things. And you want to make sure that you're reinforcing your harassment policies New Jersey is one state that has created a protected class for COVID-19. I'm not sure what Maryland's going to do, but just making sure that you are also updating your harassment policies. As we know, unfortunately, certain groups of people have now become targets of harassment, and we want to make sure that everyone in the workplace understands that that is not acceptable.
All right, thanks. We had one question come in during this slide. So Stephen asks, do employees need to sign off on these new policies? For example, can they say, I understand the new policies that are being implemented?
Whenever you make a significant change to a policy, it is recommended that you get a signature acknowledging that they have received it, because understanding is very subjective. So I would say to please have them acknowledge that they have received the updated policy would be a good practice. You don't have to, but it is a best practice. One other policy that you want to make sure that you are up to date with and understand as well is the Maryland Healthy Working Families Act. That passed 2 years ago, but there are still some employers that don't fully have a full understanding of that regulation. You want to make sure that you understand that policy, that regulation as well, because if you are exempted from Families First Coronavirus Response Act, you may still have responsibilities under the Healthy Working Families Act.
Great, and then I think you sort of answered this as a follow-up. He asked, is having a webinar staff meeting to review the policies and procedures acceptable? It sounds like you would recommend putting it in writing. Is that correct?
I would recommend putting it in writing primarily because you want people to be able to reference what you're holding them accountable to. So they may not remember all of the elements, and it doesn't have to be exhaustive. I do have some policy templates on my website, and there's going to be a resource slide on the last slide. So there are some policy templates that you can use. You don't have to create them from scratch, but I would recommend putting them in writing so that people have something to reference in the future. And should you need to hold someone accountable to it, should you need to enforce it, you have something in writing to reference and not, your words, because they may say they didn't hear that. And as we know, employees sometimes remember what they want to remember.
Sure. All right, let's move forward with the next slide.
So some best practices, and I left a letter out of this one. Best practices for implementing FFCRA is to create a policy. You also want to make sure that you have a leave request form. There is a sample leave request form on my resource page, and you want to be able to show that someone requested the leave and what they requested it for. So all of those elements are available on the sample policy that's available on my resource page. And that way, if an individual gets denied for any reason, you have the documentation that you use to make that decision. And you also just want to track it because, as is the case with any type of leave, you want to be able to have a written record of the request and the reason why it was requested. You also want to track the leave. There are some tax credits available for employers if they have to pay out leave under these new regulations. And so tracking the leave is going to be important as well. There are two types of leave under the FFCRA. The first is the emergency paid sick leave, and then the second is the emergency family medical leave. Those are paid at two different levels. And so you want to track that leave. A best practice for tracking that leave is to create some payroll codes in your payroll system. So if you already have different payroll codes like regular leave, vacation leave, jury duty, it's very easy to contact your payroll provider to add those new codes. And as you pay individuals under those codes, you'll be able to track them, and you'll have that available for reporting purposes in the future should you need it. The other thing that you want to do, yes. Okay.
Yeah, if you would just quickly repeat the two codes that you recommended, emergency paid sick leave, and what was the second?
Emergency family medical leave. Yeah. And so it would be a good practice to create payroll codes for those, again, to track the leave that you pay out to employees. And then the other thing to do is it's important for you to train your managers. You know, the new landscape looks very different. So people are going to request leave at a much different rate than they've requested it before. The need for various accommodations is going to be much greater than it has been before. And making sure that your managers are trained on their obligations, that that they need to understand these new regulations. And if they don't understand it, making sure that they know who they need to go to help them with making those decisions. But it's going to be very important that your managers are informed, that they are not making uninformed decisions on the fly, denying leave or disciplining someone when potentially they would have been covered under any one of these regulations. So some additional information, Maryland does have a work share program, which allows for employers to share share the work across an organization. So if they were to furlough people and to reduce the amount of the amount of work hours that are available to people, it can be offset by the state. I quite honestly don't have a lot of information about the work share program, so I have provided a link on the next slide so that you can visit the website for Maryland to get a better understanding of what that work share program looks like. You do have to apply as an employer to be a part of the work share program, and it gives you all of the information about how you apply and what that looks like and how you would become an eligible employer. If you need to lay off or furlough an employee, and to be clear, there is a difference between a layoff and a furlough. A furlough is when when someone continues to be your employee, the employment relationship still exists. You just reduce their hours. You can reduce their hours to 50%, any percentage under 100%, or they can be at zero for a certain period of time, but they continue to be an employee. A layoff is when you terminate the person and you hope to bring that person back. So if you need to lay off or furlough an employee to create a smooth transition, you just want to make sure that you have a plan or a process for how you're going to select those individuals, and that you provide them with documentation of of their status. So if they are furloughed, letting them know they're furloughed. If they're laid off, letting them know that they are terminated and that the employment relationship does not exist anymore. And just make sure that you're very clear and transparent and have the conversation with them, and then follow through with any other offboarding procedure that you may have in your workplace. And then if you are actually growing during this time, which some organizations are, some organizations have more work during this time. If you're growing, then you should consider all of the information that we've discussed through this presentation, from creating your policies, having a strong onboarding process, making sure that individuals are aware of the expectations and the safety considerations that you have in place, making sure that you are doing those consistently. And then also being aware as you are onboarding people that, other things have changed, such as the new I-9 is in effect, that because the Motor Vehicle Association, I don't think that's what it's called, it's administration, Motor Vehicle Administration is not issuing new IDs and not issuing new driver's licenses, that typically you haven't historically been able to accept an expired ID for documentation on an I-9, but now you can. So understanding all of those little things that have changed, so much has changed during this time. So just keeping those things in mind and understanding those things so that you can bring people on. If you're hiring remotely, how do you most effectively onboard someone remotely? How do you most effectively interview someone and onboard them? So just thinking about those things and having processes in place to do those things successfully.
One question came in from Rachel. She asks, in your recent experience, are employees making any requests that the employer considered an unreasonable accommodation?
The only thing that I have occurred is that there was an employee in a healthcare setting, a small clinic, and the employer needed them to work as they were considered essential. And the employee stated that she didn't want to return to work because she didn't want to send her child to childcare. Now, childcare was available to her because she was an essential employee, because childcare is available to essential employees. And the Department of Labor has a website that lists the qualified childcare and approved childcare facilities. But that individual wanted to not work and have their job held, even though the job was essential and childcare was available. So that's the one thing that I would say that I've seen that, and I don't necessarily say, I'm not going to say it is unreasonable, to have concerns about having your child in a community environment during this time. I'm not going to say that's unreasonable. However, the employer wasn't required to accommodate it.
Great, thanks. And we had one more come in from Jennifer. How would you address employees with mental health concerns about returning to the workplace?
Yeah, I think that mental health is a topic unto itself, right, in this landscape. But if individuals have mental health challenges and they're returning to the workplace, a few things that I would recommend for employers. The first is to, if you don't already have an employee assistance program in place, an EAP in place, consider investing in one. The cost is nominal. It's less, maybe about $1-ish per employee. And you can get that as a standalone program. You don't have to offer it through another, a medical program. And it provides resources to individuals that are very valuable. The other thing is that as employers, we are stressed. As business owners, we are stressed and we have lots of things that we need to do. And sometimes we are not as patient or as thoughtful, maybe, as we could be. And so what I would recommend is really utilizing trauma-informed management, keeping in mind that many people are going to be coming back into the workplace with what is effectively PTSD. And so really being cognizant of that and really managing with that in the back of our minds, knowing that schools and childcare for most are not available. And when people are coming back to work, they have a lot of things that they are thinking about.
Thank you for that. We actually had another one come in from Olivia. What rights do we have as a business as it relates to regulating outside personnel that interact with our business, like delivery drivers and mail carriers, to keep our workplace safe, under their safety rules? So what rights do they have for that sort of?
Yeah, I mean, there's some best practices that you could potentially implement, such as, you can put a bin outside and ask for deliveries to be placed into that bin. You don't have to allow individuals into your workspace if you don't want to. So you can create some boundaries to allow for that if you're talking about third-party vendors. Very similar to, what you may do at home where, I have the Instacart person leave things on my front porch. I don't interact with that person. So you can put notes up and ask them to leave packages in a certain place. So I hope that answers the question.
Yep, thanks. We actually had two more roll in. Do you want to take these now or do you want to move to the next slide?
I think the next slide is our links. So I think this
perfect.
Yeah, it's me.
We'll keep rolling with the questions then. Bill,
yeah.
What happens if a large number of employees request 12 weeks leave under the Family's First Act, all at the same time, leaving you short-staffed such that you cannot operate?
Well, requesting the leave and being qualified for the leave are two different things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that if the leave is, if they have the opportunity to work remote, then you should consider it, and then they are still able to work. If they don't have the opportunity to work remotely, then you do want to consider whether or not the leave is qualified or not. I haven't seen, based on my interactions with my clients, where that has happened. And, I have, a couple of clients that are healthcare facilities. I haven't seen where it's happened where a large group of people have done it such that the organization was left unable to operate. I would say that if that situation were to arise, you would definitely have to assess it based on the set of circumstances. I don't know that there's a blanket answer for that. But I would definitely make sure that, again, when people are making the request for the leave, that you ask them to complete the form so that you can do the analysis to determine whether the leave is qualified or not.
Great. Another question from Mara. Are employees modifying vacation leave based on weeks and months of working remotely and perhaps not working 100% efficiently? So are they modifying vacation leave?
So so the question is basically, employees are probably working part-time, so are they adjusting their vacation for that? Is that basically the question?
Yeah, maybe with Mara, we could help clarify the question a little bit. Yes, that's the question.
Okay. I think, again, that employers need to be flexible and also be very clear about setting.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, got it.
So I think that employers need to be clear and set outcomes-based expectations for employees, because the reality is, as I speak for myself, I'm running my business. I have a fourth grader, okay? So I don't know when she's going to need help with an assignment. I don't know when I'm going to have to explain something to her, help her log into something. So I can't necessarily commit to getting my 8 hours done between, 9 and 5:30, right? And so I think having some flexibility is the first thing for employers, and then identifying outcomes-based expectations, because really that's what it's about. It's about, did you get the work done, right? And so could you adjust PTO? Sure. But I will say that people remember how they were treated during times like this. And if we start to do things that will appear punitive, it could impact that experience. So I would just really focus on the output.
Great. And I think the last question here, it looks like from Tim, what if we cannot offer back an employee with the same compensation package? If I'm offering them a comparable one and they decline, what else can I do?
Yeah, I mean, during this time, depending on the circumstances on when the person left, and if it was purely a layoff or purely a furlough and you want to bring them back in some capacity and you're not able to do that and you offer them something that they decline, I don't necessarily know that you have any additional obligation to them. Work was available for them and they decided to decline.
All right, and I think we had one email come in prior to this webinar that came from June. You might have already touched on it a bit, but maybe you could elaborate a little. What notices are required by law to post in the business and or at entrances?
Yeah, so I don't know anything about responsibilities for what you have to post for the public, but internally for your employees, you need to make sure you have your state, local, and federal postings. And now they have added a Families First Coronavirus Response Act poster. So you want to make sure that you have that poster. We do have that on our resource page. My links on this page are hard to see, so I'll change the color before we publish it to everyone. But the poster is available. It's a PDF. It's regular size piece of paper. You just print it out and post it. Right now, that's the additional poster that is required above and beyond the standard state, local, and federal postings.
And if any employees test positive, what information are we able to share or discuss with others?
Yeah. So you can't share who tested positive, but you can let them know that someone has tested positive and they may have been exposed. I do have a sample letter for that as well on my resource page, and it outlines, pretty you may have been exposed. Someone has tested positive in our workplace, but you can't tell them who it was. You don't disclose the name of the person, but you can let them know that they may have been exposed to someone in the workplace.
Great. And while I was answering those 2 email questions, we had 2 come in on the chat from Chris. If someone is required to take a pay cut, can they apply for partial unemployment? What information would that EE need for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer to that is yes, they can apply. Yes, they could be eligible. It just depends on whether or not the rate that is remaining meets the threshold for unemployment. So the Department of Labor makes that decision exclusively. So they can apply. You should encourage them to apply. And there is a possibility that they could get partial unemployment for that difference. And it could be very partial. It could be $60 a week. It just depends on what the reduction looks like.
Last one from Stephen. What is a reasonable time frame to send out resumption letters to employees to make a decision as to whether or not they will return to work? My business is currently closed due to government mandate.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that, anywhere between 7 to 14 days would be reasonable to have someone consider, because they also may have to make arrangements for their children. So you just want to be mindful of, the considerations that they need to make, but understanding that you also need to know who's committed to returning so that you can understand what your staffing is going to look like when you come back. But I would say 7 to 14 days would be considered reasonable. I wouldn't say, 24, 48 hours would be reasonable, because people need to, make some arrangements. And so I would say roughly that. That's just a ballpark for me. That's what I would say is reasonable, but that is very subjective. I will say that.
And that is 7 to 14 days after receiving the all clear to go back to work, or is that 7 to 14 days for the employees to respond?
To respond.
Got it. Well, I will double check email to see if we got any last minute emails with questions. I don't see any others in the chat. No emails. And unless we have any others in the chat, no.
It's a great opportunity. Step back. I just want to repeat a couple of things. All the links and Kimberly, I apologize. I should have caught that before we started this, because we've gone through these slides, but the links on the slides don't show up well. They're color. They look nice. They're pretty color, but we'll make sure everyone gets the all of these links and resources. Want to remind everyone, Kimberly has graciously offered us some free resources such as templates for policies, etc. So we do follow up each email thanking you for your time, giving you a link to today's recording, especially if you have HR staff you'd like to share it with, and we will include all these links.
Yep, and you can expect that email to come tomorrow morning. I don't see any additional questions. So
Yeah,
Angie, do you want to wrap up?
All right, absolutely.
Oh,
We got to thank you.
No.
So thank you. Kimberly, you are amazing. You have done such a great job. You've helped me tremendously. I took copious notes, and I just want to thank you. I also want to thank you because if I would be quiet, you were actually ending on time or early. So thank you for your graciousness, your professionalism. Thanks to everybody who's joined us today. And we do have next week coming up. Clee, do you remember our webinar schedule? Because I forgot to look at it. We do have upcoming webinars. Clay, give a quick notice of what we've got coming up.
So Thursday, we have a marketing during and after a pandemic coming on Thursday at 11. And then next Wednesday, we have presentation from Katz Abosh, that's financial strategies in trying times. And Tuesday, we have another social media marketing during a pandemic, sort of tips for digital marketing. So yeah, we have a lot coming up. We'll include links to all of those in the follow-up email as well.
Great. All right, thank you guys. I still appreciate your positive feedback. Anything we can do better, differently, let us know. Kimberly, thank you again. Everybody have a safe rest of the afternoon.